one thing that I would like to say, COVID had its own ill effects, and we have all gone through that. But what it had taught us at large, that the workforce can work from wherever they are. Now, that with COVID fading a little bit away, I see that across industry, this concept of hybrid workforce is coming in light more prominently and more profound. Let me look at the room, because we see a lot of people across different industries, and just take a vote of quick count, saying that how many of you have not seen any team member coming back to you asking for a hybrid option to work from where they are. Let us see somebody who has not heard about this so far. Not a single hand. And that actually tells us very clearly that this is something that is a new norm that is coming up our way. While this new norm comes up our way, the topic here says that, are we securing enough and to the level what it takes to ensure that while the hybrid workforce work from remote locations, we are ensuring organizational needs are taken care of from a security perspective. The statistics says almost half of the employees are looking for hybrid workforce, and security teams are always challenged to say that, okay, are you really ready to cater to the demands that are coming in from this workforce per se? From SASE to ZTNA, whether it is EDR to VPNs, I mean, we need to deploy technologies to ensure that the hybrid workforce is completely secure from the data perspective. Now, with this brief, let me go ahead and get started with our panel discussion with the esteemed panel that you just got introduced with. Let me start first with Varun. Varun comes in from my favorite app that I use for doing my regular bookings on any shows, which is Book My Show. So Varun, we all know zero trust, right? So that's a strategic approach to the cybersecurity, which ensures the organizations where you look for two things. One is eliminating implicit trust. Correct. Second is continuously validating at every stage of digital transaction.
Correct. So again, just like you mentioned in the beginning, COVID has transformed the way the world operates, and similarly with digital companies, remote work, hybrid work, whatever you want to say. So zero trust, or the VPN that we're talking about, zero trust is something which in the layman's language means no trust. You trust no one, right? So now where does the world stand, or where does the corporate stand? There's a lot of awareness among companies, but when it comes to actionability, or have you implemented that, that is something which is very lagging. There could be multiple reasons to it, but of course, security team has to be always on the go, because the kind of devices the people use these days, the kind of networks they use, also the kind of internet the ISPs, the local ISPs the employees are using, it's very tough to calculate what's the risk that is coming in. It could be more than, and after COVID, one thing I have understood is, earlier it was like external threats and internal threats. Today it's everything on the same page. Internal threat is as big as external threat. So how do you safeguard your network? So zero trust does come into picture. And of course, if you implement it in a correct way, I think that should solve the problem. That's what I think to begin with.
Absolutely. So basically what you're saying is never trust but verify.
Exactly.
Got it.
Correct.
Coming from the consumer goods industry, Mr. KHUSHRU, what's your view on this?
In the consumer durables or the consumer goods industry, I think currently the VPN is heavily utilized. Now in the VPN, you're segregating from the trusted zone to the untrusted zone. But the moment you take the hybrid workforce, all of that goes out of the door. Because effectively, You do not know. You're trusting the people that they will utilize safe devices. But the moment you leave the secure zone of your offices, okay, you get into the untrusted zone, even if you are over VPN. So I think in the consumer durable industry, VPN is extensively utilized. But with hybrid coming in, the zero trust networks are getting more and more utilized. Desktop as a service is also going to get utilized, but it's still in the nascent stages. The most important thing to remember is in the consumer durable industry, your customer data is your gold, your oil, whatever you call it. If you lose that, you lose the trust of the customer. And therefore, it's essential that getting from a VPN to a ZTNA to working with the desktop as a service and implementing zero trust is becoming much, much more important in today's day and age.
Absolutely valid point. And just to touch upon the same, which is the desktop as a service, would you have a view on that?
So, I mean, that is where the world is going now, because again, it helps a lot. You don't have to give a laptop and then also see what are the endpoints, security do you have, is your employee playing around with it, is your IT team playing around with it, is your InfoSec team monitoring what's happening with the laptop. So, at the day, somewhere it helps if you have desktop as a service, because then as a security team, you can tell, like we have the AMIs in AWS or the golden images that we used to have. Similarly, we can have one view saying that, okay, this is what the list of tools that I need, this is the security monitoring that I need, these are the things that needs to be logged. Once you give them, then every employee is on the same page. But then the other problem that has is, every team has a different requirement. For example, a customer, a call center agent would have a different requirement. A VP of tech would have a different requirement. An SRE team would have a different requirement. So of course, the InfoSec team should have been on their toes to make sure that every different categories are catered to, and yeah, that brings new set of challenges. So again, that open up the can of worms.
Absolutely, so to say. Okay, let me move now from you to Shobhana from the textile industry standpoint. If you look at the general concerns in the industry when it comes up to securing the endpoints and the corporate assets, what comes up as the key challenge here?
Yeah, so I think as the hybrid workforce is increasing, as well as the consumer outreach of the companies are increasing over and over, one has to be very concerned about where your systems are getting accessed and how they are getting accessed. So the first and foremost thing, in my opinion, is to identify your corporate asset itself. Right? How do you identify your corporate asset and then allow the access that are required for the specific corporate asset? Right? The second one, as we said, you always use your antivirus or OS on your laptops and desktops. But in a hybrid workforce, how updated are the patches of the OS or the antivirus that are there on the end user machines? Particularly, why hybrid? Because when end consumers or end users are actually using the services, they are operating at constraints of bandwidth. Right? So you would have situations where there is not enough bandwidth where for the OS patch to get installed, or the AV patch to get installed. There could also be situations where a specific patch gets installed and the application starts misbehaving. Right? So there could be numerous such scenarios. So there definitely is a concern that the patch must get installed. And if it is getting installed, it should not misbehave, right? So that's the second concern. The third concern, I would say, is, again, in a typical hybrid workforce, is when you're having open Wi-Fis, right? A lot of times you come across open and unsecured Wi-Fis where users are connecting. You need to make sure that, there are no phishing links which are, suddenly coming in, and misleading the user into clicking and, sharing his credentials. I think that is one of the biggest concerns in terms of the securing of access in terms of the workforce. So yeah, these are the 3-4 things that come top of the mind. I know the list is numerous, but these are the ones which are not really under your control as well to a large extent, and that's why it needs to be keep enhancing and continuously improving your security stature as the time passes by.
Absolutely right. I mean, Varun, would you have any comments on those?
Yeah, so I was going through a report and I have some data for all of you. So lack of clarity remains the top barrier when it comes to implementing zero trust. And the data says 61% of security professionals are reconfiguring access points as of now. 54% of the security professionals or the digital leaders are still trying to identify how the low sensitive data moves in the network, right? And then 51% of the security professionals are implementing new technology to achieve zero trust. So again, as I said, the awareness is there. Everybody, so zero trust is a new big word, right? Everybody wants to achieve it, but would it help you? How would it help you? What's the right approach to it? I mean, we all are figuring that out.
Absolutely fair comment. Mr. KHUSHRU, when it comes up to the securing endpoints and corporate assets, what comes up in your mind as the key challenge?
Frankly, what do you consider an endpoint? Okay, endpoint means everything. It's not just about your desktop, your laptop, your servers, your network. Endpoint is every device which is utilized by your company and your customers to communicate with you. Now, the problem comes up that an endpoint, even mechanical devices are now becoming tech-enabled. Your cameras, your wearables, your cars, and even to a certain extent, human beings. So in the medical industry, for example. So I think protecting all of that, okay, with very secured way of doing things, because ultimately whatever is coming out of those devices, whether it's IoT or not, okay, the Internet of Things, it's rock solid data of the end consumer is coming out. That is where it becomes essential that it's not just about protecting your office, not about protecting your laptop or desktop. It's everything to do with the IT ecosystems of how you present it to your customer, and them communicating with you needs to be protected.
Absolutely valid point. So when it comes up to the aviation industry in this case, Ram, what kind of devices, the endpoint devices hybrid workers are using in the industry at large?
I think my fellow panelists
True, already
answered,
yes.
But the easy answer to this easy question is every device or any device. Aviation industry is not different. Now taking my organization as a very specific example, we don't follow remote working and work from home because the work that we do doesn't support that. So in our case, it's been easy to assume that laptop, desktop, so those are the endpoint devices. And but then to answer your question in a more elaborate way, I think any device that connects to corporate network, cloud infrastructure, or application or system, it's an endpoint device, right? I think a few decades ago, as I started, it's only desktop and then laptop is what we know. Then we slowly add workstation servers, then mobile devices, then tablets. Now, to add to this list, the IoT-enabled device, which we already mentioned, the cars and wearables. This is all, any device that has IP, becomes an endpoint device now.
Yeah.
And end user doesn't want to have any restriction when it comes to using a device. Earlier, we used to expect them that you use the company provided laptop or desktop, that's all. But now that has changed. After this pandemic, they want to use any device, they have access to connect to the system and work. Now, IoT device now, in our case, we are also exploring drones. So that has become an endpoint device now. Navigation systems, even point of sale systems. So all these devices are becoming, endpoint devices now. I think the list will go, will grow is what I assume. Any technology that is introduced, any device that is introduced, and if it is IP enabled, will become an endpoint device. So
That's right. I mean, I think if I look at it in terms of the endpoints, I mean, every day with the innovation in the technology, you are finding new devices that are coming in, and which gets into the category of the endpoints that actually people want to use and use for work as well.
Yes.
Now, with this hybrid infrastructure, so to say, with so many different types of devices that are coming across, what are the technologies that are coming in to secure these devices at large? What are the coming trends? What are things that you are seeing? So let me go to Mr. KHUSHRU to talk through this.
Again, I'll say it's like every endpoint in today's day and age, which is digital transformation, the cybersecurity issues which is becoming so relevant in today's day and age, and almost, I would say, more than 60 to 70% of the organizations would have faced some level of cyber issues over the last 2 years. Now, combine that with the explosion of the cloud, complex environments, okay, software as a service, IoT, okay, continuous integration, continuous delivery mechanisms in software development. The only way to protect the endpoints is basically a couple of things. One is, with the proliferation in the cloud, you must utilize software as a service, cloud-based services for endpoint protection, right? Because then you don't have to backhaul all the information back into your data centers. It's all in the cloud, right? All technology developments of security is now cloud-based. There's very little which specifies on-prem, okay? Second thing is, we utilize endpoint protection, EDR, okay? Endpoint data protection and response.
Right.
Elaborate that with XDR, which is extended detection and response, so that when a problem happens, you don't have to alert a human being. Let the software identify and prevent it. The third thing is, utilize the secured edge models, whereby identity management is more important than the device. If you know the identity, if you know the content and the construct of the person, you'll be able to protect yourself better, okay? So utilize the SASE architecture. Most important, I don't think so, we should never forget this, is ultimately it's the human on which to train them well. And it's a continuous development which ensures the future stability of the company and its progressive nature. You don't protect the individual because that's the weakest link in your chain. Train them well. Train them about cybersecurity, IT security, okay? And frankly, they will protect the company and the customer.
Absolutely valid point. I mean, I think that's kind of a core fundamental which cuts across the industries per se. Anything additionally that you see, Mr. Ram, from the aviation industry?
Not very specific to aviation, but
Or any
just
other.
to add to what he mentioned is, I think the infrastructure is becoming more and more complex, given the hybrid, multi-cloud, and now remote working. So the infrastructure is quite complex, and we as technology leaders or enterprise have adopted many technologies or tools to secure our infrastructure. Some of them, our fellow panelists already mentioned. Having said that, now if I look at my case, we have introduced new tools, but if I sit and look back, have I removed anything from my infrastructure? The answer is no. So that's where I start my answer. Even in this complex infrastructure, certain basic tools are still very critical. Now you talk about password policy. Can we ignore it? No. It is still very important. So that's something that we addressed earlier. We used to have 8 characters. Now we made it 14 characters minimum password, the password policy. VPN we already mentioned. And encryption is something still relevant. Backup is very much relevant. So, I am, Sir has spoke, EDR has spoken, uh, email security. We still continue to spend on email security, though the cloud service provider offers as a bundled solution, whether it's ATP or any other email security, but still we use it. So, we are keep on adding the tools to secure our infrastructure, our asset. Just to add to that, I think the zero trust is something that we are all discussing. The zero trust architecture is what we need to, use it as a foundation and build or bring everything on top of it. I think that's what will help us to address in a more holistic way, whether the conventional tools that we continue to use or the new tools that we bring to our infrastructure. If our foundation is strong or clear, and then we build tools on top of it, I think that will help us. Now, just to add to that, other than tools, some of the best practices that I want to highlight, few things that we follow, and I'm sure many of us. As the infrastructure has become complex and the asset is everywhere now, cloud, on-prem, SaaS, and everywhere, I think visibility is very, very important for us. What to secure and where are they is very, very important. So visibility and control. In order to have visibility, I think we need to use tools to audit, which helps us to have that visibility is very, very important. And least privilege. I think we have been talking for ages. That has not gone away. We'll have to still follow that least privileges. Zero trust we spoke. And as we are using multi-cloud and hybrid infrastructure, the unified security management becomes a very important need. So if we can bring everything into one platform and that gives us visibility, is easy to manage and monitor. And then very important is AI and ML and automation. I think the tools that are coming up now, all AI integrated. The EDR that we use, AI integrated. I think today I was speaking to one of the partner, Darktrace. It's all AI integrated. Now that helps you to understand what's happening in your network, in cloud, in SaaS offerings, everything. So if we add this also to our infrastructure, that will help us. I think layered approach is something that we used to talk earlier. I think that still remain. We need to continue to use those conventional tools, which is not costly, which is available as part of our infrastructure, and then on top of it, bring the tools which helps our hybrid infrastructure, is what I would say.
Absolutely. Shobhana, anything that you would want to comment with?
Yeah, I think just to maybe add one or two points is, finally at the end of the day, the data that lies with you or that the data that the customer is accessing, that is important, right? So something like organizations always want that flexibility and that seamlessness to be available to customers, right? At the same time, you have to ensure that the security is taken care of. So at some times, it's a catch-22 situation where you need to really play a balancing act. In such situations, possibly something like a DLP solution where you can at least track where your data is going, right? At least have the logs of what has been downloaded, what has been uploaded, etc. Right? I think that is one thing that organizations must look at, and also securing your applications by doing the vulnerability tests. Because however secure your infrastructure is, at the end of the day, if the application is having data leakage issues, or it's not storing your, having coding issues rather, right, which is allowing people to access things that they're not supposed to access, right, then it is still an issue, right? So you have to look at both the infra as well as the applications piece parallelly, and that's where possibly a DLP and a regular VAPT is definitely required, also from the applications perspective.
Absolutely. Varun, anything?
I think all my fellow panelists have covered most of the points that anyone would have in our mind. I think one thing which we all, I mean, every company do have some budgets for tools, technologies, and everything. I think one major chunk of your budget should always be for the employee awareness, right? Because he is your first point of contact. I mean, for example, if I have, say, at BookMyShow, we have 10 million customers or 1 million transactions happening every day, right? So there could be a transaction team, a payments team who could have some data of what transaction is happening, right? Now, what's important is to tell them that, boss, you are one of us, you are the security champion for us, right? You are an evangelist. I mean, it's not about just the InfoSec team. InfoSec team could be a 5-member, 7-member, max 10-member team, right? And then, and we all know, right, when we need a security resource, you don't get it because the market is so volatile right now. So you have to tell your employees, boss, you have to help us out. You are the ones who should understand what you're doing. All the tools that we have all talked about, right? Email, security, DLP, VAPT, everything is correct. It comes at the second level or the second layer. The first layer is the employee, which, as Mr. KHUSHRU said, is the weakest link. Let us make that as the strongest link so that then all the other are just the enablers, right? So security, so all the employees should have that fathom or that faith, okay, that security team, if they're asking something, that is for our betterment. That's an enabler. We are not a showstopper, a roadblocker, right? So once we have that, I think it would become easy for all things. But it's easier said than done, right?
I completely agree. I mean, I think it cannot certainly remain as a responsibility of a core team members only. I mean, it goes much broader and beyond that. Pretty interesting topic and pretty interesting views that we have heard so far. What I want to do is take a little bit of a pause and go back to the audience so that we can take a couple of questions from the audience if you have anything specifically coming up from the audience directly per se. Anyone has got any specific question that comes up to your mind? It will be a good opportunity to leverage the experience here on the dais. Anyone so far?
Waiting for the cocktail.
I know. We are actually coming in between the cocktails and this is the last session. So let me go back and have one final question to the panel. When we look at this phenomena of the hybrid workforce, do you see a particular industry where it appears to be happening it more as compared to others? Is there any view that you would have? Anyone would like to go with your initial comments and others can then support?
Definitely not in our industry. Because if we stop servicing the endpoints, in our case the water purifiers, I think we'll have a riot of 2 crore customers. But I think there are multiple IT related services, banking to a certain extent, back offices, which have got hybrid working much more emphatic in nature. But at the same time, they are still worried about the security of the data. So hybrid working is here to stay. It is not going to go away. I think there is a preference to use hybrid workforce because to a certain extent, people are a lot more productive when they don't have to travel 2 hours one way to work and 2 hours back. And as you said, if Delhi was 49.2 degrees Celsius yesterday, I doubt if I would ever go to work on that day.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one. Definitely the environmental conditions, the road conditions and the time that you spend in the traffic is the biggest one that comes up normally in any and every discussion. Those are like inherent things which are going to be there and actually kind of comes up as one of the topmost reasons where people would want to avoid those kind of issues coming up per se. Absolutely valid point. Any other comments from other panels?
Just to add to that, I think our industry are very specific. My
sure.
organization cannot follow this remote hybrid working. So we have very clear policy of not to work from home.
Okay.
So we cannot do that because we'll have to come to hangar to work on the aircraft. We cannot do it remotely. Now, yes, there are certain departments can do that work from home, but then as an organization, one policy for all. So we all come to, workplace and work. Having said that, whatever happened during this pandemic, I think we also got affected. Even right now, also the challenge that we as an organization facing is developers demanding not only hybrid working, permanent work from home. That's the biggest challenge that we are facing. Though we have a policy that you need to come to office and work, but then as we go to recruit them, the first question they ask is, do you allow work from home permanently? If yes, then I will continue the interview or not. So that challenge is something that we are facing. So there is a discussion at the management level that, though as an organization we cannot adopt hybrid working, but we'll have to bring this in case-to-case basis. So that discussion is going on. But yes, we are not very badly impacted like this.
Yeah. Anything from your perspective, Shobhana, on textile industry or any other broadly?
Not really. I think from adoption perspective, you could see maybe a consulting or a service industry is one which has really, taken to the remote working really well. I think it will take a little while for the rest of the industries to adopt. But that being said, I think all of us have the situation that even if you work from office and you're back home, you still work, right? So work from home would still be there, if not in the hybrid form, but you would still have the situation where you would need to provide infrastructure for people to work from home. I think that has always been there. It has only been highlighted a lot after the pandemic has struck.
It is getting underlined, basically, saying that, like, okay, fine, you put that in the bold words.
And it's only the core set of users who have suddenly started working from home, whereas earlier maybe you had a 5 or 10% people who had been working from home. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So again, I come from an industry where, so just like Mr. Ram mentioned and Mr. KHUSHRU mentioned, an airline or an air work industry, you cannot work from home, right? You have to come to office and work, right? You cannot open an aircraft at your home. But when it comes to our industry, half of our folks can work from home, can never see the face of the office, and can work beautifully well, right? How do we secure them is the next question. Then there would be a set of employees who must have to come to an office. For example, we also do live events, right? For example, IPL, you all would be knowing that we are the ones who are selling tickets for IPL. Now, the people or our employees or our live event employees have to go to work, have to go to meet sponsors and different things. I mean, you cannot control them. And then what happens is they carry their laptops and I don't know which all Wi-Fi's do they connect to, right? So, I mean, it's so for me, the headache is like now I have to classify data, employees, departments, team, everything, right? Okay, do you have users data? Do you have customers data? Do you have PII data? Do you have this thing? Then you have to follow this approach. Okay, are you from the live entertainment team? Are you from accounts team? Are you from, say, an SRE team? So then again, you have to have a different set of models for them. So I think that is where a hybrid set of models work. Okay, you can come to office to collaborate, but then I think the efficiency, at least I have seen, goes for a toss when you're traveling 2-3 hours to and fro to the office. So yeah, so it depends on, so it's not like, one hug fits all. So yeah, different things.
Fair point. Yeah, that's a fair point. I just saw a hand raised on the middle table. Can we get a mic there for the question?
Hi, thanks for knowledge sharing. My question is that if suppose we are talking for zero trust and all, still companies are using legacy applications and legacy operating system. When I'm talking for either Windows 7 or Windows XP Professional, still companies are using. Some of the companies are still using Fox Pro based application and all. How that zero trust is going to play in these areas where the companies are not upgraded their technologies?
Yeah. I think legacy applications are part of, if not all, still some of the enterprises. Even in our case, we do have legacy applications. The way we try to address is the legacy ERP, which was running on-prem, we migrated to cloud because there were many risks when it was running on-prem, the server upgrade, OS upgrade, database upgrade, everything was a challenge. So we migrated to cloud, hence we address all this risk around the infrastructure, hardware, OS, database, we address. Now, since this is part of our cloud infrastructure now, it is relatively easy for me to put controls, the security controls, to access it, to manage and monitor it. Now, I do agree that it is not same the way we would manage the modern day applications, but if we can do some workaround, I think that can still, there's no choice, we have to use them. So some workaround we identified, and the application is still part of our infrastructure, though we have a plan to migrate, not migrate, to replace it. That work is going on, but yes, there are workarounds that we'll have to identify to keep them as part of our infrastructure.
I think that is a fair point. I mean, if I have to really break down this challenge into two, legacy systems, old technologies are going to remain there for some time. And when we look at addressing in from a remote worker perspective, there are solutions that are there already in place where we look for whether it is remote desktop, right? Whether it is related. I mean, you have controls put in place to monitor, track, and ensure that adequate security is still provided while you are able to operate on those systems as well remotely. So that still exists, and we are able to provide those solutions as alternate channels. I mean, I think from security standpoint, probably there could be evolution that is still coming up.
Correct. So I'll pick one word what Mr. Ram said, there is no choice. I mean, there is no choice for both. For example, as a security team, there is no choice that I can leave the legacy application behind, and also the legacy application does not have a choice that, since I'm an old one, I can go unsecure. No, you have to be part of the security ecosystem. Just for example, if say a new phone comes to your house, who learns it first? A 5-year-old kid, right? Who learns it at the last? The grandfather or the grandmother, right? So you have to be there, slow or steady, one today or tomorrow, you will have to be there. That is the final comment.
Good question. I see one more hand
I
raised.
think he's thumbs up.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question?
One question there in the front row.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Santosh Vaswani, journalist and editor with CIO News.
Just wait a second, we'll just get you the mic.
Can't hear you. No,
Yeah,
he
we
has
can't.
the mic at last. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm Santosh Vaswani, journalist and editor with CIO News. I would actually like to ask, as Mr. RAMKUMAR Mohan was talking about email security, I would like to ask that if in a hybrid work model or any work model, if an employee happens to click on a phishing email, what could be the strategy to protect that endpoint or device from being hacked? What could be the strategy in today's post-pandemic era for the IT leaders to protect and defend the organizations from being hacked even after the attacker tries to attack you?
The question is, let me understand whether I understood the question correctly. This is about phishing attacks, the email security?
Phishing attacks, email security, or any kind of attacks from the cyber attackers. They try to hack you, they try to hack your devices, but still there could be a strategy in place to protect the organizations and the endpoints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, as we all discussed, the weakest link in our security is the user. They are using email, so that becomes the easiest target for cyber criminals to initiate any kind of attack. And phishing attack is just something that we all are aware that that's easiest way that anybody can initiate, any cyber criminal can initiate attack. Now, as part of our cyber security process and policy and tool set technology, we will have to take care of them. Though it is, it's a headache, it's a pain, because you, end user, and the security awareness, you do n number of sessions, you educate them, you coach them, you mentor them, you tell them, no, you are not supposed to do this, but there are occasions that employee or the end user end up doing it. We keep on communicating to them, saying that if you receive email from external resources, just be careful before you click any link and look at the from email. We have done so many sessions on this, but still I would get email not only from junior management, even from senior management, saying that, oh, I got this email from CEO, or I got this email from the finance director, and they would be escalations. But if you look at the email, it is, it is not email generated, by employee. It is from outside. Somebody is trying to, face it. So the maturity of end user is very important. So we'll have to continue to bring that awareness in them and continue to give them training. That's very, very important, and which is part of our security plan. So we cannot ignore that. And I also mentioned during our discussion that whatever the end user use, the device, the email, email is the one application they use the most. Though they access business application, but it's relatively easy to control them, because we can define the access control, who can do what, all those things, and these applications are also running in our secure environment. But when it comes to email, which is coming from outside, then it becomes very challenging. So we will have to have the email security controls, strong email security controls, and also tools which help some. In our case, sometime back we implemented Fish Alert. It's a small tool that we developed, that any email that employee receives, if he's not very sure whether it is genuine email or phishing or spam email, he doesn't need to use his brain. There is a Fish Alert button as part of his email application. Just click that. That's enough. So we forward that email to the security team, and then we take it forward. So that one Fish Alert tool, the button, it's very helpful for employee, because he doesn't need to waste time or use his brain to understand whether that has come from right source or not. So such initiative to help end user will help us to address that risk.
But I think to answer your question also, yes, there are tools which are available on the EDR and the XDR, whereby even if they click on a malicious link, because the first thing which has to do is to infest your device. And the devices utilize these cloud-based technologies to actually protect. So it actually protects, prevents, and nullifies. That means once it identifies that this is a security threat, it isolates that device from the network. But of course, again, it's a matter of time. If it's not able to detect very well, it proliferates, because malware, that's how malware is done. But there are tools available even today whereby you can actually protect yourself even after clicking a malicious link.
Correct.
Just to add to that, if you use the SaaS offering, and in our case we use Office 365, so Microsoft has inbuilt security controls on your email environment. So that itself helps us to reduce the risk, and then you bring your own tools on top of it. That's how we try to manage. So I think there is no 100% security. I hope all of us would agree.
It's a myth.
We'll have to look at what work best for us, and we'll have to implement those tools and technologies.
I think the basic principle still remains there, which says that early detection is a key. Then how quickly we are able to respond to that detection, and then take the resolution actions coming up further from there per se. So that goes logically in that same sequence, irrespective of where it comes from and where it kind of gets into person.
There is no shortcut.
There is no shortcut. Yeah.
Again, don't trust, verify all.
Absolutely. Don't trust, verify all. Yeah, good question. Thank you. I think we got a couple of minutes for just the wrap up, but if any question there, we can take it quick or we can just do a wrap.
There is a,
One?
yeah, there's,
Okay, the last question then.
Hi. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. So, myself, Arun. Follow-up of the question we just answered, right? It was running back of my mind, does the existence of cyber insurance response team, how much critical it is? Do it really need, because the level of impact defines the investment. Again, probably my question to Varun, how much critical is to have a cyber incident response team? Is it pretty much mandatory, or any information security team can handle that on their own?
Hi, Arun. So, my comment on it would be that, of course, it is good to have, I'll not say it's a must-have, but it's a good to have a team which can be your incident responder or your first incident responder. Because just like the question, the follow-up comment on that could be, the moment a phishing email comes into a system and somebody clicks it, if you have an email security tool, it quarantines the mail, right? It doesn't send it to the inbox of the recipient. Now, when it's quarantined, the AI, ML, everything that the tool has can decide if it's a threat or not. That is one. But then you should have a human eye looking at it from a security perspective and seeing, okay, yeah, this is good to go, this is not good to go, right? So I think having a security incident team or an incident response team for any company which handles customer data or huge volumes of transaction, I think it's a good to have team.
Just to add to that, if I understand your question correctly, your question is not to ask whether it is needed or not. There is a cost involved, right? Looking at the cost, whether we need to have it or not is the question. So, as he mentioned, if you have a budget, why not? You should have it.
And one
but
more,
if you don't have a budget, then obviously the question comes. That doesn't take away how you manage cyber incidents, right? That's security incidents. I do not have exclusive team, right? My budget doesn't support. I hope my CEO is not listening to me, but I still have responsibility to manage those, incidents. So I have a team who plays multiple. It's one of the responsibility for them to address this. So that's how I address it. So should we address this or not? The answer is yes. How we address depends on what we have on the table. So we'll have to take a call.
Yeah, and also do one more, 30 seconds more, and also to end on a humorous note on his comment. It's also not about your budget. It's also about the other companies or the competitors' budget also that you're talking about, right? Because at the end of the day, you may have a resource at X number of rupees or X lakh of rupees, but then his security professionals are in so demand that there could be somebody else who's eyeing him, right? And then one day before joining, he sends you a no-show email. So it's not only about your budget, it's also about how much budget the other company has to hire that particular person. So yeah.
Interesting views, and thank you for all of these. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Really appreciate that. Thank you for being a wonderful panel.
Thank you so much, Anand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.